Welcome back to Mind and Magic for what is to be the most blasphemous video that you've ever watched on YouTube, where we are going to blame God for literally everything. So let's get into it. Alright, so it's taken a little bit longer to do this video, but I'm going to make it twice as long because one, I have a lot to say on the subject, and two, it's just taken longer because I've had my voice wrecked by the flu. So if I sound a bit froggy, that is why. I find it quite amazing just how many religious people, for whatever reason, always seem to want to debate me on the undebatable. And by that I mean God, the nature of God, religion, and they're welcome to believe what they want to believe, however illogical it may be. The thing is, I've never actually had one of these Christians wanting to debate me who actually believes in God as a creator. And that's because if they did, it would destroy their entire Christian narrative. But before we do just that, we need to back it up a bit to where this all started. It was a comment left on a video about all the Epstein stuff that's been coming out lately, which they've been covering it up for so long that now that they've released 3 million pages, I still don't trust it. Because they've essentially gone from there's no Epstein files whatsoever to 3 million pages of the most horrible stuff imaginable, and I still think they're hiding the worst of it. I think it's quite naive to think that they just pony up the truth after a 10-year cover-up. But no matter. The comment left on the video simply said, "And now tell me that the devil is not real. Seriously." And here lies the issue with religious people's view of God, the devil, what have you. Because they ascribe all the good stuff to God and all the bad stuff to the devil. The only way that they can rationalize Epstein and his group of sickos is to attribute it to the devil. But as one of the replies to this comment so eloquently put it, the devil is and always has been humanity's excuse. That is to say that a devil is not needed for people to be awful. Some people are just awful. It doesn't need to be rationalized. It doesn't have to have the hand of an infernal being guiding you. No, some people are just terrible. And you would think that everyone would understand that, but then a Christian came out of the woodwork to do what Christians do and argue the point by proving the point. Jack Dalton here doesn't seem to be all that bright, so we'll try to go easy on him. He says, "Nah, the devil can't force people to do things. He can only tempt you, so you can't use that as an excuse. It is still you who chooses to do the act out of free will." Now that's exactly what the original post said. That the devil is humanity's excuse. They use him as an excuse all the time. It's still humanity that does it. And here this genius comes along saying it's wrong and says the exact same f***ing thing. I mean, what a waste of time this person must be to talk to in real life. To go, no, 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 and then proceed to argue the position by restating the position. I mean, I know that people are getting dumbed down by design, but Jesus Christ, he ain't making you smarter. It takes a special kind of someone to confidently argue against a position and then actually just restate the same f***ing position. And then people wonder why I believe that humanity is ultimately doomed. Because this is the next generation's best and brightest right here. Now, this person has already proven to be unreasonable in their opening argument. So I already know that engaging with them is not going to do any good. With that said, I also can't help it sometimes to poke a Christian in the brain to try to jumpstart their mind to think for themselves instead of all their dogmatic programming thinking for them. And so this person was reminded that all this terrible Epstein stuff that's been coming out was God's fault. Which will really short-circuit a Christian because they don't understand that if you have a creator who's created everything, then that also must mean that that creator is responsible for everything.
You cannot play God, then wash your hands of the things that you've created.
So let me show you how a Christian does their best to evade such an inconvenient truth. Because to them, God is responsible for all the good, while the devil is responsible for all the bad, even though God created the devil. But they just want to leave that part out. He argues this by saying, regarding that God is responsible for Satan, God didn't create Satan as Satan. It's like you're saying creating a free agent equals to being morally responsible for all its latter choices. Christian theology is clear that Satan was created good and fell by his own will. Same logic applies to humans. None of that matters. The intention does not matter. And we'll go with the old robot analogy, in that if you created a product, say a robot, and it malfunctioned and went off and actually killed people, who is responsible? The robot or its creator? In every single case, a creator is always responsible for its creations. They have an entire segment of law called product liability revolving around this concept. This guy is saying that it's the robot's fault because the creator didn't create him like that to start with. How well do you think that's going to hold up? And this is really the entire crux of the argument, in that a creator is always responsible for what they create, no matter what the Christians tell you. I've never had a single one of them be able to provide me an example of a creator who is not responsible for their creation. God and religion are the only things that they try to get away with saying the opposite. But that's what religion does. It tries to make you responsible for God. Christianity blames you for being created as you are. They'll tell you that you were born into sin, you were born imperfect, and it's your fault. It's not a mistake of the Creator, it's somehow our fault that humanity was not perfected. And many of them are quite skilled at cherry-picking Bible verses in an effort to try and back up their position. But if you throw a Bible verse back, such as Isaiah 45:7, that says God creates evil, both light and darkness, both good and evil. Oh, well, now it's a mistranslation. No, that verse is a translation issue. Hey, newsflash, the entire Bible has a translation issue. That's what happens when something is written in one language and then translated to all other languages. There are going to be things that are lost in translation. That's just part of the package. He says the Hebrew word means calamity or disaster, not moral evil. Well, what do you think a calamity or disaster is? All right, let's say your house burned down and your entire family got burnt up. Are you going to say, well, praise God, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for all this good. No, disasters and calamities are associated with evil, especially if it says that God creates them, because that would mean that he burned your family alive on purpose. An earthquake that kills thousands of people, it's just a fun time. In the Epstein files, all the unspeakable things that have happened to these victims, oh, that's just God having a bit of calamity. Understand that what's being said here is that God is responsible for nothing, but yet purposefully does disasters and calamities. That's what this person's saying. Again, if you created a robot and that robot got out of hand and someone was killed because of it, would the creator, the programmer of that robot, be held liable for it? Anyone with any sort of common sense whatsoever would be able to answer this without issue. But not this Christian. He says no. The robot analogy assumes humans are programmed machines. Well, they are. But he's missing the point completely. The analogy of the robot is an analogy for a reason. The robot analogy did not assume humans are machines. No, instead, the robot analogy assumes that humans are created by a creator, and therefore the creator is responsible for his creations. That's the entire point of that analogy. It says Christianity explicitly rejects that. Angels and humans are treated as moral agents, not robots. This is another thing that Christians are kind of dumb about. They don't believe in programming, period. Don't even bring up the subconscious mind to them and all of its programming. He then says, no, the robot analogy assumes a creator programs every action like a code, which isn't the Christian position I described. I then asked him what he thought DNA was. if it's not programming? And of course, that one was never answered. See, the entire religious narrative that these people like to push is that God created everyone, humans, devils, which all rebelled on him. But the problem with this narrative is that it suggests that God is not omnipotent. Like what? He didn't see that coming? No, they'll tell you that foreknowledge isn't causation. But yes, it is if there's a quote-unquote master plan involved. You can't have it both ways. Either God knew what was going to happen and he did it anyway, purposefully, and is responsible for it, or he didn't know what was going to happen and he fucked it all up. He made errors, he made mistakes, he's not as perfect as they make him out to be. If you believe in a central God, a being that created everything, then that being is responsible for everything via causation, because everything that follows is from that creation. Of course, you have to go back far enough to get to that point, but that would have set everything into motion. Do you know the story of Job in the Bible? Job was a very wealthy and blessed man, and God considered him very righteous, so he continued to bless him. But then the devil said that, well, he's only righteous because you have blessed him. If things were bad, then he wouldn't be. And God was like, I'll take that bet. And he granted the devil license to ruin Job's life. His entire world started to implode. Messengers would arrive saying that raiders had slaughtered his servants and stolen his herd of oxen. Then another came in saying that fire in the sky consumed his sheep and his herdsmen. Then his camels were stolen and his servants were butchered. He started losing everything. And then, that wasn't enough. All of his children were killed, crushed beneath the ruins of a storm-battered house. Job declared, the Lord giveth and the Lord hath taketh away. But this wasn't enough to satisfy the devil. So the devil poisoned his flesh and gave him an affliction covered in sores and boils. Job was scraping the blisters with broken pottery, and this was still not enough to sway him. The people whispered, the neighbors accused him, and even his own wife said, you need to curse God and just die.
Why don't you just fucking die already?
And Job told her, shall we receive good from God and not evil? I will not curse him, the devil has failed. And then after some time, his wealth returned. He had twice as much as before. He had new children, and he was blessed greater than before. Now, one of the most striking things about the story of Job is that God did this on a bet, just a dumb bet for really nothing, to his best guy, his most righteous person. It's just like the two old guys in the movie Trading Places, where they bet $1 that they can ruin Dan Aykroyd's character's life, while simultaneously lifting up Eddie Murphy's character to being a successful Wall Street trader. All over $1, all over nothing. I mean, think what he did to his own son up on the cross. Before that, he allowed his best guy, Job, to be tortured and his children killed. Doesn't exactly show that God cares when he gives permission to destroy your entire life, but he sure does love his tests, of which any lesser man would fail completely. I know that when people that I care about pass on, that I start cursing. I wish that I had the inner strength and patience of Job. But I have a hard time wrapping my mind around how someone who claims to love you can torture you and do such terrible things to you, like some sort of abusive partner in a relationship, claiming to love you while they're smacking you around, and doing it over a bet for like nothing. Why does he let the devil goad him into allowing for such calamity? Now, Christians will say that the most important thing here is that Job did not break faith with God, and God won the bet. That's their takeaway from this. But I think the most important takeaway here is that Job did not sin with his lips, meaning he did not curse God, and he did not lie. And the truth that he was saying here is that God creates both good and evil, just as it says in Isaiah 45:7, which every single Christian that this has ever been brought up to says is a mistranslation of the word. But Job here in Job 2:10 says otherwise, that yes, God does create evil, and he did not sin with his lips. How are you to accept the good from God and not the evil as well? How can one receive credit for all the good things and not the blame for all the bad? He knows that God is doing this to him or allowing it to happen to him. And he asks him why. What has he done? He wants to know the charges against him so that he can understand why he is suffering, why his children were killed. So we have another verse besides Isaiah 45:7 showing that God creates both good and evil. The source of everything gets both the credit and the blame. And Job does blame God. He asks God why he's doing it to him. He knows where it's coming from. He just doesn't denounce and curse him for it. He sticks with him despite everything that he's going through. But he does give credit where credit is due and identifies the source of evil that's befallen him as coming from or being allowed by God. So anytime Christians shoot down Isaiah 45:7 as being a mistranslation, you hit them with Job 2:10, King James Version, because all the other versions only exist because someone didn't like the original translations. That's why I don't like bothering with other versions of the Bible, because they were all created because nobody could agree on what anything means. The King James Version may not be the easiest to read, but it is the least adulterated version of the Bible. Don't think that Christians aren't above twisting the words of their own sacred text just to further their own narrative and agenda. If they weren't, there wouldn't be 50 different versions of the Bible. There would be absolutely no need for that. But the real reason you'll never hear them admit that all creators are responsible for their creations is because they are the creators and God is the creation. And that's not saying that God doesn't exist, just that their view of God is in their own mind. That he sits up on a cloud just watching people being bad all day without ever putting a stop to it. I think a supreme being would have better things to do than that, wouldn't you? I mean, I would, and I'm a lowly human. And so if you believe in a supreme creator, the only logical position to have is he who created everything is responsible for everything. Religion tries to make you responsible for God instead. And if they can get you believing that, then they can control you. That's all it is. In order to know the true nature of God, one needs to pay attention to observable truth. You can learn a lot more about God from nature than you ever will from a prehistoric Jewish book. And I'm no stranger to Scripture. This comes from somebody who uses it all the time in ritual. I invoke archangels and Shem angels all the time. I know what I'm saying. Another way to know the true nature of God is to study the subconscious mind. And as it so happens, I have a program on just that called the Divine Mind. And for those interested, I will knock 20% off using the links in this video only. And that will about do it. I gotta go before I lose my voice completely. I'm still getting over the flu, which is entirely God's fault. And I'll see you next time. Take care.